Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Nice. This beautiful fall day. I don't know about you guys, but here in Arizona, it's so nice to have it get cooler. Have sleep with a blanket and have fresh air. It's really, really sweet. So I'm really enjoying it and getting up in the morning and being able to do something because it's not too hot outside. Really enjoying the fall. Svetlana is too. I see a lot of you agreeing with me. We'll wait another minute as people continue to log on. And I learned some new technology yesterday, so I'm still playing with it. So please bear with me. Okay. That. I don't see some reason this isn't working because I can't see any of you. I can't seem to share the screen or anything. All right, I'm going to go back to my old way of doing things. And then we're going to do that. Okay, now I can see you. You can see the presentation. And yeah, thank you, Marina. Chloe came over yesterday and I wanted to change my camera. Chloe came over yesterday and we figured out how to make using two screens easier. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm still learning how to navigate it. So here we are back again, ACI 18. And we're in class 5, we're like halfway through it. Time is going fast, at least for me. I don't know about for you guys, but it's going quite fast for me. And we're jumping into something that it makes sense, for us to jump into in the middle. We've had Master Shanti Deva and opened our heart up. I'll slow down, sorry. Opened our hearts up, and we talked about emptiness and hands and karma and all sorts of things. And now we're going to jump into Sema or Pramana or logic or clear thinking. They're all words to describe the same thing. It's a very heady class. You have to think a lot. You have to cook it a lot and go over it again and again and again. If you have not done ACI 13, this will just be a little taste. And I encourage you to then go back and do ACI 13. I did ACI 13 3 times, at least, just to get through my homework and my final. And of course, the first 2 times, first time I lost all my work, so I had to do it all over again. Second time, I lost some of my work because I had moved. So I did it all over again. And then the third time was the charmer. I was able to get through it and to do my final and get my certification. Since then, I've taught it a few times, and I can't say that I have really understood it. A lot of times I feel like I'm just a vehicle for what Geshe Michael taught me to come out, and that, there's a little bit of understanding up here, but it's a very deep subject, and we'll go into why we're studying it. Come on, next slide. So this is what the commentary on valid perception, the book called the Pramanavartaka in Sanskrit and Sema Namdrel looks like in Tibetan, right? The original hand-carved pages. I can't. Yes, Natasha. I'm having trouble with this. Natasha, you raised your hand?
Yes, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Unfortunately, we see all the slides. We don't see just one slide.
Natasha, your hand is raised?
Yes, and I'm talking right now.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
It's my problem. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately, we see all the slides. We don't see just one slides.
Thank you for letting me know.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Really sorry.
I thought you were seeing the other side page. Okay, let's switch. Okay, I need some help. Because when I did it with Chloe yesterday, she only saw the single slide. Can somebody help me? Nobody can help me?
So you're presenting from PowerPoint, is that?
Yeah,
And have you started the slideshow like usually? Is it is it like the actual slideshow or? Let me
yes,
open up PowerPoint.
it's an actual slideshow,
Okay.
but you should be seeing my other computer.
Oh, okay. It's using two.
I'm using two monitors, my
Two
computer and a monitor. And it should be,
Maybe when you choose, I'm sorry. Maybe when you choose the window, you have to choose the biggest window, not the smallest window.
yeah, but it doesn't give me that option. I just did something in my preferences. Let's try that. Let's do this. Do this. What, but I've lost you guys again. Where are you?
We can see you.
I can't see you though.
So you
And
see the PowerPoint or?
no, I can't see you guys. What do you see right now?
We see you in the group and whatever we choose under the view. We can
Okay,
choose the
yeah.
speaker, the group.
Dang, we had this figured out yesterday.
Hmm.
Let's try this. What do you see right now?
Oh,
Make
with
sure you're-
presentation. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to here.
I think it's gonna work now.
Presentation.
Yeah, and if you go to the view reader, oh
What do
now
you see now?
we see the same issues we had before. We see all the slides, but just a few seconds before when you, that's perfect now. That's exactly what it is. Perfect. Thank
Wait,
you so much.
wait. All I see is red on the left side. Wait,
I see the slide.
no, I got it. I was zoomed in. Okay. It's cool.
Yeah, we see everything. It's perfect. Thank you so much, Ven Gyelse. It's perfect.
Yeah, but it doesn't work as well for me, unfortunately. But if it's working, I was hoping to be able to look at my big screen so that I wasn't looking down at my notes, but that's not going to work. We'll figure it out at some point. Thank you, everybody, for your help. I appreciate it.
Okay. For me,
What?
it's it's okay. I mean, for me, it's zoomed in. Like the presentation is like huge, but it's okay. Well, I'll figure it out. It's okay.
You have to put adjust window in the view.
You're talking to David.
Adjust window. Yeah, I mean, the window is like half the window. It's just the PowerPoint is zoomed in really far, so it's.
David, go on the right corner, top right corner, you see the view and you can check the options and you can actually put your mouse on the presentation and move the size of presentation or anyone on the screen.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you.
So I did something here on this end and it's impacting all of you. Sorry. I didn't change anything in my PowerPoint. It's funny. All right, we have a lot to do here. We'll have to figure out what's going on later. I'll have to get someone to get online with me and we can play with it. So anyway, back to Semanamdra, back to the Pramanavartika, back to how to think clearly. This text or not this text, but Lopen Chuki Drakpa, Chuki meaning Dharma. Lopen is a master and Drakpa is famous. That's the Tibetan name for Master Dharmakirti, who lived in 650 AD. And he wrote the classic logic text. And it's a text that's in defense of an earlier text by Master Dignaga, who was basically the founder of Buddhist logic. So logic, clear thinking, valid perception. Are we thinking clearly? We are having valid perceptions all day long. It's just our normal perceptions coming in, you know, the light, the shapes coming in to our brains and how we normally perceive them. So what is a non-valid perception, what we call a non-sema or a non-pramana? Pramana is a valid perception. Sema, these are two different words, pramana, Sanskrit, sema, Tibetan. So I'm thinking about when next month I'm going to go down to Diamond Mountain, and on your way to Diamond Mountain, there is a pistachio orchard. And at this time of year, the pistachios are beginning to lose their leaves, you know, and I'm getting there as usual because it's about 6 hours away to drive. I get there when it's just getting dark. And I'm driving and, you know, the leaves are blowing across the road. But then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this little blur go across the road. And I put on my brakes because I think I see a mouse running across the road. Right? So this is a moment of, is it a moment of valid perception? No, it's a moment of false perception. It's what we call sema mingi lope. It's a perception, but it's a false perception. So we have all these different perceptions coming in all the time. And we're, 65 per finger snap that we have to, our brains have to sort through and pick out what is the most important for us at that time. So the principal Tibetan text we'll use is the key to the logic machine. Such a cool name. It's like, how do we open up this machine that helps us to think clearly? It was written by Purpajok Jampa Sultram Gyatso, who was the tutor to the 13th Dalai Lama. And he lived 1825 to 1901. That's on your homework. So why should we study logic? Why do we need it? It is the science of how you know something is true or false. Most of the time we react with our emotions, and we don't really think about whether how we're reacting is true or false to the situation. So the first reason is, if you are ready, studying logic triggers your intellectual capacity. and empowers you to see emptiness directly, especially the study of mental images, chi chedra, which we will get into more. We'll touch on it today. So picture yourself at home with your family or at work, somewhere with other people, right? And all of a sudden you're feeling jealous of somebody. Oh, they got this and I didn't get it. Or maybe you think that they're trying to hurt you. Like, why did they ask me to leave the table so someone else could be here? Why are they trying to hurt me? Or something bad happens, and you blame somebody else for it. That person probably isn't even around. And because you don't like them, maybe we're paranoid that they're trying to hurt us in some way. We then give meaning to everything they do. How they talk to us, how they talk to other people, how they treat us, how they treat other people. This is our emotions speaking, right? Because we're feeling hurt for some reason. We're blaming somebody else. So logic is the science of how you know if something is true or if something is false. What are the different ways of seeing? How do we know what is true? How do we decide if it's true? Through clear thinking, through pramana. This is the first thing that you learn in the monastery when you're about 13 years old, is how to debate, how to think, how to find out what is true. And they do this for 2 years. What do? They debate 3 to 5 days a week at night, and then another hour every other morning. As you can see, they have this special courtyard. These are not 13-year-olds, but older monks, right? And you walk around. In fact, I should pull up a picture. I'll find it for class tomorrow of the debate ground at Diamond Mountain. You walk around trying to catch somebody's eye and get them to debate with you. It's like, hey, you want to debate? Let's figure this thing out. So it starts out one-on-one, like you can see this monk here with, I moved too fast, this monk here. They're starting out one-on-one, or this monk here with that monk there, right? And the one standing up, one sits, one stands. You get your rosary. You can see they all have their rosary in their hand. And you say, Di Jitar Chu Chen. Di, meaning this wisdom. So you have to be on your toes and think fast. Di Jitar Chu Chen. What about this? And Chu Chen is the subject of the debate. So you might say, let's take sound. And that's how you would start a debate. Gyelse Sep said it was the kindest thing that Lama Tsongkhapa ever taught him, was to teach him how to think clearly, to teach him Buddhist logic. So if you're ready, studying this will push you to see emptiness directly. because you are analyzing how things exist. So here we are, students of this, and there's basically two types of students according to their level of intellectual and spiritual capacity. So let's talk about those, since that relates to us. There's one group of students whose minds are not so sharp, but they follow Buddhism because they believe in it, or because their parents taught them. They went to temple all their life. They haven't thought about it much. For us, we've gone to church, schools. We believe what people tell us. We talked about this last weekend. We believe what we're told, and we don't really question it. At one point, and even in the Abhidharma, they say the world is flat. We say the world is round. Do we question what we believe? So, what's the problem of just believing it? Well, it's unstable. You just believe it because you haven't checked it out to see if it's really true. So to follow a teacher or a teaching that you're attracted to, or that is appealing, without examining it is dangerous. Because, like all karmas, it will wear out, it's temporary, and when it gets difficult in your life, when you're having problems in your life because you haven't examined it, it's very hard to continue to believe and keep faith. In this onslaught, in this pressure of having difficulties in relationships, at work, with, whatever it happens to be, if we just believe. And so we want to be the kind of student, the second kind, who uses our powers of reasoning, right? To figure out, should we follow somebody? Should we follow some teaching? So to follow because of reasoning is wise. It's like having a really strong foundation. We've just seen earthquakes and floods, and I'm thinking about the earthquake in Morocco, of houses that just have rocks or mud bricks stacked on top of each other. And it's worked for so long, why shouldn't it continue to work? But if you think about it, if it's in an earthquake-prone area, then maybe it should be built differently to protect you. So to think about it logically. So don't accept what I say, what any teacher says, until it makes sense logically to you. And remember, where do the qualities of a teacher or a path of yourself, of anyone else, come from? So the natural thing that happens is blind faith, let's say believing in a self-existently amazing, good, wonderful Lama, is this self-existent path, right? It's great at the beginning. It helps us at the beginning, but don't stop there. But then what happens is we think that that teaching or that teacher is self-existent, and then they say something the teacher itself says something, and then you begin to lose faith in them because you think they're coming from their side. And then we have ignorant attachment to things. And then because of that, we create negative karma. And so the wheel keeps turning and we end up down here from high to low. But at the beginning, if we're questioning things, we kind of start out down here. And as we really question and examine things under the microscope, then we begin to understand that things are not self-existently good, that they're coming from us. And then we don't. I keep losing my cursor. And then we don't get ignorantly attached to them. And then we can create good, positive karma. So what's number 2 of the 4? The second reason. To go beyond faith, to understand, to analyze what we can't see. So we're using perception. We're using logic to establish the truth of something that we can't see directly. Valid perception is seeing directly. Denzin, to hold as true. To hold what is true. Here we're talking about the Dharma. If we can analyze it, if we can understand hidden reality, like what was the karma of not being able to get my computers and PowerPoint to work this morning when it worked last night? Can I see that? It's hidden to me. I can use logic to get to it. And that's what will keep Dharma safe in the world. The great Sakya Pandita, he said the only people qualified to keep Buddhism safe in the world are those who understand and who can logically prove the truth of Buddhism. Can you prove that this pen is empty of self-existence? So David, would you read this for us, please?
Sure. Suppose a person comes to understand the scriptural tradition for how to reason, this art of proving or disproving things. A master like this is a person who keeps the teachings of the totally enlightened Buddhas safe here in the world.
Thank you. This is what the Sakya Pandita said. So if you can't prove Buddhist faith to yourself, the teachings will disappear. So you have to do it for yourself, for everyone in the future. So that's what our lineage teachers have done and passed down to us. You know, I received these teachings primarily from Geshe Michael, and he proved it to himself first. And then he had to teach it to me, and I had to prove it to myself. And then I can teach it to you. And so what's your job? Prove it to yourself. So then you can pass it on to others. So we keep these holy teachings in the world. So we must understand why we believe in this stuff. Don't sit on the fence. If you don't know something and you're not sure of it, put it on the shelf and come back and visit it. Take it down, dust it off, and cook it again, right? But don't throw it out because somebody thought it was important. And our spiritual understanding, our kelwa, will grow as we continue to examine the why, and not the how, but the why of things more and more and more. But if it doesn't make sense to you, for the moment, just drop it, put it on the shelf. But if it does make sense, use it and follow it. So number 3, we use logic to not judge others. Logic will prove that it's illogical to criticize others. Every quality of every perception is coming from a seed in our minds, our minds based on our past actions. And it comes out and it ripens out here, right? Out here. So where is that coming from? So we use logic to prove that to ourselves. Lord Buddha said, let's see, who else can I call on? Christina. What did Lord Buddha say?
Thank you for asking me. If you are not me or someone like me, you should never judge another, for you shall surely fall.
And I'm going to give you a lung in Tibetan. Naam dang drawe gang saki so sungi, gang saki sumin sungte, nampar gyurtare. Yeah. If you don't know, if you are not omniscient, if you can't see what karma creates, what result, you should never judge another, for you shall fall. Fall where? Down to the lower realms. Because we're believing that that person is coming this way, that they are self-existent. So I don't know if you remember, but there was a story about Lord Buddha. And this is where this comes from. He lived in a monastery and he stayed there for a while, but then, occasionally he would go to town or I guess every day really, the monks would go to town and they would beg for their food and then they would bring it back. And he got to thinking about the people in the town and how in the monastery they had all these wonderful teachings about how things existed. And in the town, they didn't have anything. They didn't have any dharma. They loved having the monastery close by. They treated the monks kindly. They shared their food. They gave, cloth to them for their robes, whatever it was. So out of his compassion, he would go to town and he would teach the lay people the Dharma. And you're not supposed to leave the monastery and go and hang out with the lay people. It's looked down upon because who knows what you might be up to. So there are these rules and laws that say you should stay in the monastery. You're supposed to stay there and study and debate. But he didn't care about that. He saw a need. He saw people who wanted the Dharma and wanted to live their lives well and wanted to get out of suffering. So he would go to town to teach the people. And of course, he did it often enough that others began to notice. And there was one particular monk who noticed, and he complained about it to the other monks. Gossip, right? You know, so-and-so is going to town quite often these days and hanging out with those lay people. And so then they began to gossip, and you know what happens when anybody gossips? Not, it doesn't matter if you're a monk or a nun or not, it grows. And more people are talking about it. And so, of course, it came to the abbot's ears. And the abbot was like, okay, I think he had a little bit of compassion for this monk who went to town, kind of understanding what he was doing, but he didn't want to encourage the breakdown of the rules at the monastery. So he went to the monk and he spoke to him, and told him that he needed to stay at the monastery. Also, by this time, there were some other monks in the monastery who thought what he was doing was pretty cool and wanted to be involved in it. So they were also told that they had to stay at the monastery because it was creating some problems in the monastery. So what happens? They stay in the monastery and everything is nice and peaceful at the monastery. The guys who were gossiping are happy because the other monks were told that they had to stay and they couldn't go to town. But now who's unhappy? The townspeople are unhappy because they wanted the Dharma too. And so after a few weeks of everything being quiet in the monastery, the monks begin to go back to town again to teach the town people. So this, of course, created more problems in the monastery. And the abbot, what we say, his hands were tied. He couldn't do anything. So he had to leave, ask them to leave. So, and why is he telling us this story? Because he was the monk who judged and caused the others to have to leave the monastery. He was the one who complained. He was the one who was getting to complain with him. And he says, first he lost his robes for 500 lifetimes. And then he was reborn as a dog for 500 dog lives. He is giving us personal advice. Don't judge others unless you are omniscient. Learn clear thinking. Learn pramana so you can judge what is true and what is not true. At least take care of your own mental afflictions first. Normally, we point out others' mental afflictions first. We say instead of keeping our own 6 times book, we keep their 6 times book for them, right? We write in their book. In Christianity, we would say we go for the mote in their eye, the piece of dust, rather than the big piece of wood in our own eye that's causing us to see this thing in sun. We're not clearly as to what we're constantly we are constantly criticizing what you're doing, constantly judging. So if the practice put forward by Lord Buddha, the practice of clear thinking, if Buddhist perception works, then my life should have gotten sweeter than it was 25 years ago. Has it? Yeah. Has yours gotten sweeter? And when it comes to others, do you have any idea what they're thinking or why they're doing something? How about having reverse paranoia? Maybe they're doing that to get me enlightened, so I can see the plank in my eye. Wouldn't that be a much more fun and helpful way of looking at things and bring so much more joy into the world rather than And I used to be a big complainer. I will totally admit to it right here. I complained a lot. You could ask my ex-husband. And I hope that I now am complaining less. The fourth is you become a person of valid perception. You become someone who has mastered logic. One who is capable to keep the Dharma in this world. So what is a semi-capable? It has all of these qualities. You've mastered logic. You can keep the Dharma in the world. What is a person of valid perception? First, we need to talk about what is a valid perception. There are two types. The first one, Nunsum Sema, and the second one, Japak Sema. Direct valid perception and deductive valid perception. So, direct valid perception, that doesn't involve any kind of idea or concept. It's direct, right? You have an experience of it. You have an experience of a pen, of a blue pen. You're either seeing it, something, or you're hearing it, or you're feeling it, touching it, right? Or you're thinking it. And it can be focused on outer objects or your own thoughts. Japak Sema, deductive valid perception. This one involves an idea. Like, did you hear something? Did you see something? Did you have a direct valid perception that the pen hit the table? Yeah, that's a valid perception. But if I take the pen, put it behind my back, do you know what happened to it once I put it behind my back? No. You have an idea of what happened to it. You put two things or more together and you have an idea. And so you deduct what happened. There's many kinds of reality, right, that we can only perceive later through deduction. Like astronomy. Now we have this amazing telescope out there, is it the John Webb? anyway, whatever the name of it is, I can't think of it right now, who are trying to get this direct perception of what they think is going on in the universe because they've had ideas, that they've deduced things. They've gotten little indications here and here and here that the universe is expanding by little indications, and putting them all together, that they have deduced that our solar system is expanding. If you perceive, so what does this have to do with anything? If you perceive emptiness directly, it's as good as seeing with your eyes. So in Buddhist logic, direct valid perception and deductive valid perception are equally valid. It allows you to act consistently with the belief in emptiness. It allows you to act consistently with the idea of past and future lives, with the hell realms, with the angel realms, etc. Anything you perceive validly, whether directly or with an idea, is accepted as an existing thing. So what? What's the point? It will be a while before you see emptiness directly, or how karma works directly. Right? But by using logic, you can deduce long before you see it. You can have an intellectual understanding, an intellectual perception of emptiness. So to deduce that something is correct and live by it is the karma to get yourself to a Buddha paradise. To see emptiness directly, first you need to deduce that emptiness is true through thinking about the pen, its parts, a dog, a human, doing the logic. Then you're deducing it. You're not having a direct perception that the pen is empty. You're having a direct perception of a pen, but you're deducing that it is empty of self-existence. And once you have done that, you're on your way to having a direct, valid perception that the pen is empty of any self-existence from its own side. And once you do that, you can become an enlightened being. So we use debate, we use logic to figure out the truth. We have to start first with the subject, and then what we're trying to prove about that subject. So what is a reason? The definition of a reason, Taki Seni means reason, definition, is anything I put forth as a reason. Right? So you could say the sky is blue because it looks like an orange. Anything you put forth as a reason. Right? It's right to study Buddhism because the sky is green. How about that one? So the sky is green is the reason. It's not a good reason. It has nothing to do why we should study Buddhism, right? But that's how you can start a debate. and how you can get down to why should we study Buddhism. So anything you want to give as a reason will qualify as a reason. It doesn't have to be correct. It doesn't even have to exist. And you don't even have to agree with it. It's just a place for starting. It's just, do they understand Buddhism? Yes. Do they understand sky is green? Yes. So it's just common ground. It's a place to start from. And we always, when addressing anything with someone, we have to relate it to where the other person is coming from. What is a correct reason? That's a different thing. Excuse me. A correct reason is where the three relationships hold. And this is going to get your mind tied up in knots if you're like me. There have to be three relationships which hold for a reason to be correct. So, of course, we need to know, what are they? The first one is what's called chokchu. It's the reason, it's the relationship between the reason and the subject. So for chokchu, for this relationship to hold, the reason and the subject must make sense. Let's take drachepa. Sound is a made thing. Okay? Sounds are made. Sound is the subject, and made thing, which is the reason, applies to sound. You with me? 2, there's this awkward word, the positive necessity between the reason and the quality to be proven is called Jacob. So positive necessity means that they relate to each other in a positive way, not in a negative way. If this is true, this is true. That's a positive necessity. So here we're talking about the positive necessity between a reason and the quality. If the reason is true, then the quality must be true. Right? So if it's made, it's a changing thing. It has to be. Right? If it's a created thing, it's changing because it came from parts and pieces and it's been created and it's continually changing. The third one is the negative necessity between the reason and the quality. So here we're saying, if it isn't 2, then it can't be 3. So we can go back to if it's not a made thing, it's not a changing thing. That's what's called the negative necessity. Okay. So we're going to look at this slide and think about it during our break. So consider. Di Jitar Chu Chen. Consider sound is a made thing. If something is a thing which is made, it must be a changing thing. If something is not a changing thing, it cannot be a made thing. If something is made, it must be a changing thing. That's the positive necessity. Hello, cursor. If something is not a changing thing, it cannot be a made thing. That is the dokap, the negative necessity. So if you test the statement and the three hold true, it will be a correct statement. So let's just go over it again. The three stools, the three ways. I decided to go on. We'll take a break in a minute. Chokchu. If one, then it's three. Jacob. If three, it must be two. Dokap. If not two, not three. Consider sound. It's the subject, the quality, changing thing. Consider sound, it is a changing thing because it is made. Does the reason it's a made thing apply to sound? Yeah. So if the reason is true, then the quality is true. It's made, and the quality of a made thing is a changing thing. If it's not a changing thing, then it's not a made thing. So these are the three relationships, and they have to hold to have a correct reason. And with that, we're going to take a short little break. Let's do, what time is it? Let's do 7 minutes. Okay? That's 8 minutes after the hour, whatever your hour is. And then we'll come back. Okay? See you then. All righty. I hope your mind had a moment to relax with all of that. But we're going to delve into it a little deeper now and talk about some of the rules of debate. Remember that we have the subject, which was sound, the quality, it's a changing thing, the because, the reason, because it's a made thing. First of all, you and the other debater must agree with definitions. So they must understand sound, they must understand changing thing, and they must understand made thing in this instance here. 2, both of you must agree that the reason applies to the subject. It's made applies to sound. Is sound a made thing? I think we can agree that it is. They must also disagree that the quality changing thing, right, number 2, applies to the subject. Sound is a changing thing, or isn't a changing thing. I think it's supposed to be agree. Sorry about that. And then the typo there. Debaters must agree that 2 applies to 1. Sound is a changing thing, or we can say sound is one of changing things. It has the quality. And then they debate to show how 3, it's made because it's a changing thing. So the first logic topic that is studied is this division of existing things. So first there's all existing things, and then there's unchanging things and changing things. Yupa, all existing things. Takpa, unchanging things. Does that mean they're permanent? No. And then mitakpa, which is really not unchanging things. So we have 2 negatives, creates the positive to be changing things. So let's talk about takpa first. Takpa, its classical definition is one object which is both a thing and which is not such that it lasts for a moment. Permanent, which means it lasts forever and never stops. So you might hear other scholars translate it as permanent. Know that it means that it's unchanging. Very, very rarely is it something permanent. So we call it an unchanging thing. Emptiness, tompani, and empty space, or just space, are classic examples of takpa, of unchanging things. Does emptiness change? No, it goes in and out of existence in relationship to the object, which is empty of any self-existence. It doesn't get any more lack of self-existence or any less lack of self-existence. It's either there or not there, right? So as long as the pen exists, the emptiness of the pen exists, the lack of its self-existence. Once the pen no longer exists in any way whatsoever, then its emptiness also goes out of existence. So we're talking about, remember, we're talking about things not having any self-existence, not having any nature of their own. So emptiness is completely unchanging. It doesn't get any less empty or any more empty. The same is true of empty space. The space that we're sitting in the moment is always there. We can go in and out of that space, but that space doesn't ever disappear. It's always there. It can be occupied space or unoccupied space. When you move things around in your house, they occupied one space, and now they occupy a different space, right? So these are two classic examples of an unchanging thing. Things that don't start, they don't end, they're there, right? They don't go out of existence unless the object it's attached to goes out of existence. We're talking about an existing thing that is not changing moment to moment. And that is the correct definition of an unchanging thing. And the point here is that things that don't exist, like rabbits with horns, right, could be considered to be unchanging, but they're non-existent. They are not objects that exist. So we have to define very carefully that unchanging things are things which exist that are unchanging. So mitakpa, changing things. Instantaneously changing moment to moment. Anything which lasts for only a moment. They can be things that are changing in a gross way, like this glass. If I dropped it on my hard floor, it would then be in pieces in an instant, right? Or that it's just wearing out over time. So if something breaks in front of you, that would be a gross changing thing. And just about every kind of object is changing subtly, moment to moment. It's wearing out moment to moment. Buddhism says that the very creation of an object is the cause of its destruction. Why are things changing moment to moment? Where are things coming from? Your karmas are changing moment to moment. Think about it. Sometimes mitakpa is referred to as impermanent. But why is that not a good definition? It refers to something or suggests something that is going to end. The Tibetan and the Sanskrit, though, refers to something which is changing, moment to moment, fleeting or transitory. There are some situations where mitakpa is properly translated as impermanent, such as impermanence in the form of death, chiwa mitakpa. So in the monastery, logic, or Dura as it's known, is taught, baby logic. They teach baby logic, thing called collected topics. You know, as I said, at 13 years old, they debate for a couple of years, they study it for 3 or 4 years. And then at age 16, they graduate to formal logic and perceptual theory. Dura is the most important thing in the world. You can see emptiness directly. Okay. In the monastery, they teach logic using a bumpa, a water pitcher, or pillars, because these are two things that are always there. They had to gather water from the stream or the well, and all the buildings are held up by pillars. So you will find in the logic text, they use the example of bumpas, water pitcher, or pillar all the time. Now, in logic, because by using it, we can see emptiness directly, there is a special key called Chi Chedra that helps us to do that. And this is the second logic topic. Quality and characteristic. Chi Chedra, quality, characteristic. Chi means quality or a set or a generality, and Chedra is a characteristic of that quality or a subset of that quality. Okay. So, for instance, the one, we don't use bumpas and pillars. We use something that's much more prominent in our lives. We use cars. So chi here would be quality like car, quote, car, or carness. Right? The thing which is characteristic of car. Things which are typical of car. And there is something which is important about this thing. You need a lot of spiritual aptitude, kalwa, spiritual goodness. And either you have it or you don't. If you don't understand this, go out and do some good deeds and do your coffee meditation and dedicate it, right? So you can understand this better. You know, Kelwa comes from serving others, serving your lama, serving old people, serving poor people, taking care of others, children. So if you find your mind getting all knotted up, just put it on the shelf, go do some good deeds, and come back and revisit it again. You have to have this spiritual I don't want to just say intellect, but it's a spiritual understanding of how things work. To be able to understand Chi Chedra, to be able to see emptiness directly, to be able to see dependent origination directly. And if you don't understand it, you might have some difficulty with this. If I was to show someone an angel, for instance, and they don't have the kelwa, they are not going to see that person as an angel. They're going to see them as just a normal being, right? So you have to have this kelwa to even study these higher things, madhyamika, the most subtle way of looking and understanding the world. You need to have kelwa. In the monastery, you were asked to do a 6-month retreat to develop kelwa. Right? And don't forget that we're doing a review. So it goes like this. First, you have to understand subtle impermanence. Then chi chedrak. Then see emptiness directly. So again, chi is a quality or set, a generality, and chedrak is a characteristic of a subset or instances of generality. So this is a chi. When I think of carness, it's kind of like this picture book car. Like when I was 2 years old looking in a picture book and there was a picture of a car. That's how my mind sees it. And so every time I hear the word car, I have this picture in the back of my mind, right? This tiny little picture. And it has carness to it. What is it that gives it carness? So this is general. It's the thing in your mind that you see when you hear the word car. So take a moment, close your eyes. Car. 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 Okay, open your eyes. You had an image, right? Of a car. Of car. How do you know that this thing with wheels is a car? What gives it carness? The logic schools are obsessed with this question. When you see carness, quote, or car, you say, oh, that's car. That's right. That's characteristic of carness. So that's car as general. That's chi. And then we have Chevys and Fords and Toyotas and Mitsubishis and whatever, Lexus. These are specific instances or subsets of car. I hope you're still with me. We can also say that each of these can be achieved, like Toyotas, right? You can have new Toyotas, old Toyotas, Prius Toyotas, RAV4 Toyotas. Each of those can be achieved. And then they will have chadraks, things that are indicative, that are subsets of them. So a very general test of whether something is achieved, something general, right? Or a chedrak, specific, is that if you wiped out all the cheese, it would automatically wipe out all the chedras. So if you wiped out all of those, all cars, then the things, the Toyotas, the Chevys, the Fords, the Mitsubishis, the Lexus, the Subarus, they wouldn't exist anymore. There are 3 different kinds of cheese. There is only one real cheese, and the other 2 are not. They're just kind of what we call nominal cheese. So we have Rick cheese. Rick is a type or a class or a family or a category. Chi is general and unchanging. So it's a general, hang in here with me, as far as a type or quality, meaning the general type of thing, the general type or kind, which are the individual things, which are characteristic of it. Formally, it's defined as that existing thing which subsumes the multiple things which are of its type. That means a general quality of carness, car, and the things that are characteristic of it. The classical example is this thing called sheja, all knowable things. So think carefully about this. Think of car as, quote, car, or the quality of carness. Now think a car, the car, car. Quote, car, a car, the car. Is carness the same as a car? Carness is a quality, an attribute, a nature. So a car has carness, but it is not carness. I can't get into carness, but I can get into a car. So this is a life and death question. The difference between a car, the car, and quote car. For example, Chevys, Fords, Toyotas. The way that our reality is occurring is closely tied to this question of carness. The reason you're perceiving your reality the way you do. What in the heck am I doing wrong? It has to do with all of your suffering. It is directly related to understanding carness and the quality called car. It is very subtle, and you gotta cook it. And then another kind of chi is dunchi, meaning generality. And it has this very intellectual definition. Svetlana Dunyeva, can you read this?
Yeah, sure, thank you.
Thank you.
The appearance to the second instant of a conceptual state of mind, which is perceiving a water pitcher of the opposite of all that is not the water pitcher of the second instant, the opposite of all that a pen is not, as I imagine it, while I perceive something, and that which I mistake as the real pen.
So thank you so much. So this is something we really have to read over and over and cook. Dunchi meaning generality, general as far as objects. So we're talking about the actual mental image, right? The element that is put on this object, but which is not the object, must have three things. Okay. General as far as objects, these three things, well, we'll get into that. First, we need to have a mental image of something, of which we've already seen. I can call this a pen because at some point, probably my mother said, that's a pen. Now, I have two different kinds of pens here, but I call them pen. They look a little different from each other, right? This one has a springy thing on the top and a point on the bottom. This one doesn't have a springy thing. I have to uncover to get to the point, and it's already there. Yet, I label both of these pen. I have some kind of mental image from my past. And I mistake that mental image for the actual object. So take, for instance, and how do we arrive at that? Like, I look at my desk and I'm looking for my pen. I negate everything that does not correspond with my mental image of a pen. It's the opposite of all that is not the pen. They used bumpas, they used water pitchers. We can stick pen in it. Right? I'm perceiving something, and in the second instant, as I'm looking, I'm erasing everything that doesn't match that mental image. So the opposite of all that a pen is not as I imagine it while I perceive it, and that which I mistake for the real pen. So I think this is a real pen, but I am overlaying it with my mental image of pen. That's why I can call these both pen. So it's a dunchi is a mental image of something we've already perceived, like a pen or a pot, and we mistake it for the actual thing. What am I seeing? Geshe-la says you're seeing colors and shapes. It's interesting. in one of those videos about the mind that we posted last week, they say even colors, that your eye cannot perceive colors, that it happens in the mind, right? That it's just wavelengths of light that then the mind separates into colors. So who's creating this object? Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? Excuse me. It's coming from our minds under the influence of the seeds that we have planted in the past. It comes from loaning or giving somebody a pen, right? Our mind organizes all this data. It's just information, suggestions coming in. It's shape, wavelengths, to the ear, again, wavelengths, and the mind with all of its synapses, if you look at it scientifically, different parts of the brain light up and put this information together. And a moment later, pen comes out. Our mind fills in the blanks and creates a dunchi, a mental image of a pen or a pot. What we're actually seeing, though, is a mental image of a pen or a pot. And then the third group, Sokchi, meaning Sok is like a group or a gathering, and Chi is general. So this is a physical collection of the parts. For the pot, we can say the top of the pot and the belly of the pot and the bottom of the pot, right? The opening. For a car, all of the physical parts that go together to create a car. These are just this, gross way of putting things together. Sokchi is just a gross nominal chi, and it's not very helpful at seeing emptiness directly. Although for me, when I first got these teachings, and I lived like Geshe Michael was teaching about 5 or 6 hours from where I lived, like my time in mountain is now. And all the way home, I'm thinking car. When does it not become a car? I'm using Sokchi to try and get to my mental image of what a car is. Like, what if you take the wheels off a car? Do you still see it as a car? At that time, I lived on some land that had some cars that had been dumped in an old stream bed, and it didn't have windows, it didn't have a steering wheel, it didn't have an engine, it didn't have wheels and tires, but I still called it a car. What was forcing me to see this piece of messes as a car? So you can use this, but in general, understanding the process of how you get to calling it a car, right? When you think of car, carness, could get you to see emptiness, which will lead you to enlightenment. So this is the key to seeing emptiness. Go home, meditate about this for, 5, 6 years, however long it takes, 20 years. It's worth it. Think about it. It's important to think about how your past karma is forcing you to see and experience your life the way it is. And to see emptiness directly, you need to be able to distinguish between Dunchi, the car, or Gyelse, or pen, Sokchi, a car, the idea of Gyelse. But that's Richi, sorry, the idea of Gyelse. And then Sokchi, which is the parts that make up Gyelse. Or do it for yourself. The relationship between Richi and Dunchi, between fact and my perception of the fact, pen and my mental image of a pen, the difference between, or the relationship between the raw data and the image forced on me by my karma. This is what we have to cook. To understand emptiness, we need to investigate this intimate relationship between karnas and your mental image in your mind of car. When you think car, like when you closed your eyes and I said car, it will liberate you to see the connection. And if you realize directly how we perceive objects through these mental images, right? You realize the ultimate meaning of dependent origination. And that occurs during the final hours just before you see emptiness directly at a place called Chujok, the highest thing. So what? We have to stop our mental afflictions to reach nirvana. That's, end of story. To finish our mental afflictions, we need to be on the path of habituation, purifying our karma. And to get to the path of habituation, we need to see emptiness directly. To see emptiness directly, we need to see dependent origination. How we are creating our reality. So Chi-Chedrak is the mechanics of how dependent origination works, how projections work. First, we need an intellectual understanding, be very precise and clear about the definitions. Then we need to support it by performing service in relationship to others, your parents, your teachers, your children, the poor, the elderly, and keep our ethics, be good people, keep that well, purely. And we need to understand that when we perceive something, we actually do so by perceiving a mental object. And we mistake it for the actual object. This mental object is forced on us by our past karma, an actual object that exists independent of our past karma, independent of our projection, don't exist. And its absence is what emptiness is. So by realizing directly how we perceive objects through mental images, we realize the ultimate meaning of dependent origination. And the realization of dependent origination is the supreme object at the stage of the path of preparation. Preparation for what? The direct perception of emptiness. And that ends today's class. You have 15 minutes per day trying to catch that mental image, trying to identify it in your mind, right? That you think you are seeing outside. Close your eyes. Pen. Pen. You have an archetype of what a pen is. You are not seeing you are not seeing the actual object at all. You are seeing this archetype, this chi coming out of your mind, little tiny thing, and laying it like chocolate sauce on ice cream onto the object. Think about it, cook it, look at the relationships, use logic, and you will be unstoppable. Yay! So let's take a moment to remember why we're here. What have we talked about? All these classes, emptiness, 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 karma, 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 from this way, from this way, from this way. We are here to end the suffering in the world. We are learning different ways to do that. We are learning how to catch ourselves creating a deceptive world. That's what it means to be deceptive. It's deceiving us. We're deceived. Right? And if we can catch ourselves doing that, understanding that we are not seeing a self-existent pen, which of course, as I even talk about it, is appearing self-existent to me, as are all of you on the screen. Right? It's wild. It's wild. So let's dedicate it to our own pure, total enlightenment for the benefit of every being, that their suffering may soon be over. All righty then. Thank you for being here. Thank you, translators. Thank you, tech. I'll work on getting my tech together. I'm gonna need a little more help. Teach an old dog new tricks. So I will see all of you, I hope, tomorrow. And cook it. Think about it. Try and catch yourself. You know, Geshe Michael has a story of looking at the pot on the stove and realizing that it wasn't a self-existent pot. We have objects around us all day that we can do that with. Right? We are so lucky.
Thank you
There's
so
so
much.
many.
Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful and clear class. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad it was clear. You got to cook these things for a long time so that it's clear for yourself. And if I can teach it clearly, then I know that I'm getting somewhere. So thank you, Christina, for that feedback.
Thank you.
And Chloe, it didn't work this morning, so you've got to come back over to help me.
No problem.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Bye-bye.